more for those we love than we will for ourselves.
Yes, right.
That's the beauty of being human. That's humanity at its best, right?
Yes, that's why you want to think through, if you do have an aim, what the benefit would be to the people that you love and to your community.
That's right.
Because it anchors it. Okay, the meta claim in the juxtaposition of these narratives, this is so cool, is that the voice that tells the wise to prepare in the time of crisis and the call to adventure are manifestations of the same distal goal.
Yes.
So you could imagine that the ultimate uniting goal brings all the underlying potential stories together.
Yes.
And then that's developed through the biblical corpus. And
yes.
in the New Testament, that's fleshed out completely, because the claim in the New Testament is something like the embodiment of the Spirit that's characterized in multiple ways in the Old Testament is made manifest as the willingness for voluntary self-sacrifice in service of the highest goal. Yes. And that's what's acted out in the Passion story. Yes. And that seems to me to be precisely accurate, is yes. that there's that, because you said yourself earlier, you know, that a goal that is only serving your own, so to speak, narrow and proximal motives isn't one that's going to last. It has to be anchored in multiple ways, and it has to be worthwhile. But there is this insistence that's, I think this is the monotheistic hypothesis actually, is that there is a distal aim that unites all subordinate aims, and yes. if you can ally yourself with that, you become something approximating an unstoppable force.
100%. Yeah, that's where all the energy comes from.
Yeah,
because there's so much. I look at it this way. You can call it God or you can call it life, whatever I prefer God, but still, life supports whatever supports more life. So as an individual with my own goals, take your bees, the bumblebee could be selfishly going after just the nectar for itself, if you want to call that selfish, but then what attaches to its legs is pollen, and that's why we have more flowers, right? So there's a certain amount of benefit by anyone's individual desire of the Father, right? You know, it's like with that desire is the ability to fulfill it if you can persist and discover. But I found that, I believe, that when your desire is to serve something more than yourself, first of all, you get out of yourself, so there's no more the internal anxieties and fears.
That's for sure.
You're not there.
Well, those are, you know, that concern, thoughts of yourself and neurotic suffering are so closely allied statistically that you can't separate them. So if you are thinking about your narrow self,
yes,
that's the definition of misery.
100%.
Right? Yeah. It's amazing.
The mind is, it's distorting, deleting, and generalizing. It's a reduction system so that all this input doesn't overwhelm us. So what happens, that reduction system makes us not experience some aspects of life. We only get this feel. So I said, we don't experience life, we experience life we focus on.
Yes.
So it's our job to direct the focus, but then have enough reasons to follow through on that focus, and then have enough emotional fuel. I mean, think of it this way. It's the difference between knowing something intellectually and having it in your nervous system. Mastery starts with cognitive understanding. Cognitive understanding is like $3, $3 will almost get you a Starbucks. You know, no one cares. It won't do anything, right? But if you go from that to emotional understanding, which is consequence you're describing, where I start to learn that if I do this, it gives me this pain, or if I do this, it gives me this pleasure. Now I'm going to apply more of what I've learned. Well, my goal is to get down to physical mastery, where it's so in your body,
level.
And that's what you're able to do with immersion after day after day.
That's right.
You don't have to think about it anymore. It just happens. When I went to drive a stick shift car the first time, I don't know your experience, but mine was overwhelming. That guy teased me because I'm like, I'm supposed to do this and this and this and watch the road too. It's never going to happen. But sure enough, you get in your nervous system with enough repetition, enough emotional reward, and then all of a sudden it's in your body, and now you can do 12 other things. Hopefully you're not texting, but you can do it all. So
that's what people meant by character development.
Yes.
A character development is the development of those procedural habits that shape perception itself.
100%.
Right, and it's not the same as propositional knowledge, which is the knowledge that you can discuss.
Yes.
Yeah, and it does require, and so you're, now, so let me ask you about.
But I want to finish something you said, because I haven't done your process. I want to do this. What do you call the process you described?
Future authoring.
And you are getting to think of reasons. So the only thing I would add to it, if I was able to add my 2 cents, which is all it's probably worth, I would alter their state while they're doing it to a higher level of energy. Just doing it alters your state.
How do you suppose you could, so the advantage to the system that we have is it's distributable online, it's highly inexpensive, it doesn't take very much time, and it's scalable, but it doesn't have that participatory element, right? So that's a problem.
You can still generate choices of music, or you could generate some element of exercise for them to do physically, a breathing process. Like, for example, in the study you saw, they mentioned 10 minutes of practice. Well, not everybody did it, but the 10-minute practice comes from something I do. You're familiar with priming, right?
Yeah.
So for your audience, just remind people, priming is when you think it's your thoughts, very often those thoughts have been primed by the environment. So one quick example, so they know what we're following, you and I are following, is they took a group of actors, 4 of them, 2 men, 2 women, had them go out and approach people in the park and the mall and all these things. And they walk up to them and they have a cup of coffee. I mentioned this the other night when we were together. And they hand you the coffee and they look down. So could you hold this for a second? And they look down. They don't wait for you to say yes. Well, 98% of people take the coffee because it looks like it's going to fall otherwise. They reach in their pocket, they take out their phone, they put it back, they say, thank you very much. They practice doing the exact same way, the same facial expression, men and women. They do 100 people each, 400. The only difference is half of them they gave iced coffee to, half of them they gave hot coffee to. Now, 15 to 20 minutes later, somebody comes by with a clipboard. And they come up and say, excuse me, here's $20. This is not a scam. We're just under a tight timeline for our research. If you read these 4 paragraphs of this story and answer these 2 questions, we'll give you $20. And a lot of people didn't even take $20. They're just, okay, I'll do it. They read the story. They ask them a question. The primary question is, describe the main character of this story. What were they like? What are their qualities? 81% of the people given iced coffee said the person was cold and uncaring. 79%, basic variability, of the people that got the hot coffee said the person was warm and genuine. The same thing happens with creativity tests showing you IBM and Apple. Seeing those, that's all you got to do before the test. The ones that see the Apple commercial or even the logo, because Apple commercial was Think Differently, scored 22% higher in the creativity test. So much of what we think we're doing ourselves is being shifted by the outside world. So I say prime yourself. So
that's what religious practice is supposed to do.
Yes, and I think that's what it does do.
Well, so for example, in the story of Abraham.
Yes.
Okay, so the story is a sequence of micro adventures that Abraham has, and they expand in scope as he progresses, which is the story of life, right? But at the beginning of each adventure, he aims upward, and that's the rekindling of that covenant, and indicates his willingness to sacrifice.
Yes.
Right. So that's an indication of that, what would you say, humble willingness to change, and it's a prime. And it's a very useful prime, and it's one that you can actually apply. So for example, and I'd like to know how you do this technically when you go on stage. So before I take the stage, my wife and I do this. We have a musician, which is really helpful. He helps us focus and everybody in the audience focus. And there is something about music that does that entrainment, that physiological entrainment.
Everything in my summer, you wouldn't last those 12 hours if you're just sitting still. It's all movement, it's all music, it's constant. And different types of music for different emotional states that I want to produce. So I use that as well.
Yeah, I could see that in your events, that there's a party atmosphere to them, but there's a reason that people use music while in religious ceremonies, for example. Okay, so the next thing that I try to get the aim in mind, and my wife does too, because she introduces me. And the aim for me is always a quest. It's like I have a question, and it's a real question, and I want to get farther in answering it, right? And so I don't know what I'm going to say, but I know the tools I'm going to use. But the aim is, I know the aim. The aim is a clear question. If I don't have that, the talk wanders and it's opaque, okay?
There's an outcome. There's a clear outcome that unifies you moving towards it. And you're unconscious. It takes over.
Well, and that's the prime.
Because I could even have the plan, but because I know the outcome, when I go out, I feel the room and it always changes.
Of course. Okay. So that's one of the things I was curious about. Okay. So the other thing we do is take a moment, and this is very serious moment, to remember that 3,000 people took a lot of their time and energy and money to come and do this, and they're very happy to be here, and we should be very happy that they're here also, because it's highly unlikely, and that we should do everything we can to eradicate anything that isn't entirely grateful for the opportunity, right? So now we've got aim and the appropriate mindset, and that's a prime. And then it is so interesting, because I learned over time that I had to do a lot of preparation for the talks. Now I can do it with less now, but I do a lot. But once on stage, I had to pursue that aim, and I had to let the preparation go. That didn't mean I didn't have to do it. Okay, so now
I have the same beliefs.
Okay, so I'm very curious about the way that you manage this, because you're a very high intensity speaker and you're very charismatic and compelling, and you maintain it for much longer than I do. I go for like 90 minutes. I had lectures at the university that were 3 hours long. I was pretty much done at the end of that. But tell me how you prepare for one of these events. And then you also said when you go on stage, you read the room, and I want to know what that means, because you obviously, was one of the things I taught my wife when she was learning to speak publicly. I said, well, first of all, don't look at the crowd. It's not a crowd. Pick people, because you can talk to people. You're talking to a person, and you can do that, right? And then, so you get your attitude right, and you, oh yes, and then if you look, I told her, look everywhere in the audience, because everywhere you don't look, you're afraid of, right? And so you want to go on stage and you want to position yourself. You look at these people and you look at these people and these people and these people, and you see where you are, and then you're not self-conscious. And then if you're pursuing your aim, so the aim is, I'm going to answer this question and I'm going to be pleased that these people are here. You're not self-conscious because it's not about you.
You
right?
100%.
Okay. So tell me what you do.
So first of all, I'll mention just about public speaking as a whole. It's one of the largest fears that people have in a public place.
Yeah.